I'm the chair of Gravenhurst Against Poverty, and it's a pleasure to have you all here with us this evening. Thank you for your presence. Shows that you care about the difficulties that people are experiencing and that you believe in what G.A.P is doing, and that is very much appreciated. So I'm going to, first of all, I will say on behalf of Beth Houston, who was to be our host this evening, she's just recovering from laryngitis. She's present here with us, but not really, her voice is not strong enough, so it'll be me, I'm sorry. And I will start off with the land acknowledgement and safe space statement. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we recognize and respect Indigenous peoples as stewards of this land. We are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe Nation. We acknowledge the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. Diversity is not always visible, and to uphold values of inclusion and compassion, I would like to establish this gathering as a safe space for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as those who identify as being part of the LGBTQ+ community. Thank you. And I guess I'll introduce myself as the chair, giving the chair's report. So that's what I'm going to do at this point. So I first of all want to start off by just thanking the members of the G.A.P Steering Committee. The time that you donate to meetings along with your hardworking efforts as hands-on volunteers is very much appreciated. Gratitude is also extended to those tireless volunteers, generous donors, and loyal supporters who were unable to make it to this evening's meeting. Congratulations to all of you for playing a vital role in maintaining G.A.P's pillars of service to the Gravenhurst community. The 2022 G.A.P financial statement was prepared by Morley Accounting Services, approved by the G.A.P Steering Committee, and is available upon request. I would like to extend a very special thank you to Peggy Ann Boudreau for her countless hours of personal time spent ensuring G.A.P's finances were in impeccable order for this report. And that was just affirmed by Teresa Morley from Morley Accounting Services. She told us how lucky we were to have Peggy Ann, and I'm so happy that she's getting that due recognition. It is now my pleasure to provide a few highlights of G.A.P's activities and accomplishments since our last AGM. This fiscal year, we began responding to the substantial findings reported in the G.A.P needs assessment completed at the beginning of 2021. Its purpose was to inform both our budget and strategic planning, and you can find that full report on our website. In answer to 92% of the survey respondents who stated that they were running out of food essentials, we added more food to our packages. Our 5-day-a-week food rescue program was a significant help in supplying that extra food to our neighbors. We also received funding to add grocery store gift cards to their boxes. In April 2021, we hit a peak volume of providing prepared meals and weekly groceries to 650 neighbors. That number is at a current plateau of 550. Our 40 G.A.P garden boxes continued to provide volunteer grown fresh vegetables to our neighbors week after week. Due to COVID, our young people in the YAC program began meeting virtually on Zoom every month. On the YAC meeting day, volunteer drivers delivered snacks and activity supplies to their homes. We purchased computer tablets to help our neighbors without devices to be able to access the internet. Continuing with our responses to the needs assessment, we established a volunteer ride program along with the existing taxi card program. We distributed gas cards with funding provided for that purpose. With kindness, volunteers made regular wellness check-in phone calls to our neighbors. The number of people who registered to volunteer with G.A.P grew to over 275. And this past year, they contributed a total of nearly 17,000 volunteer hours, the equivalent of 9.31 full-time staff members. The presence of our G.A.P volunteers raising awareness every week at the Gravenhurst Farmers Market resulted in more donors and volunteers becoming interested in supporting G.A.P, and more of our neighbors knowing about G.A.P programs that they could access. Thank you to those volunteers. Our active social channels, engaging website, and high-quality marketing materials continue to attract great admiration and response. Brian White is to be congratulated for his exceptional talent. The nearly $180,000 raised for CNOY in February is evidence of his great ability to draw sponsors and community support to G.A.P. I know you're there, Brian. We don't see your face, but I'm going to thank you also for your tech support tonight, troubleshooting for us in the business meeting and in this one. Yes, take a bow, Brian. We appreciate what you do. This past fiscal year, we spent a considerable amount of energy and effort on the Main Street Ing building project, with the hopes of acquiring it for affordable housing and wraparound services for the Gravenhurst community. The G.A.P fundraising campaign for the Ing building yielded a remarkable $500,000 in pledges. Although the financials needed for the purchase of the building were out of our reach, the process itself shone a vivid light on G.A.P's mission. As a result, the Ing building fundraising campaign inspired impressive growth in our support base. For that reason, G.A.P's vision of establishing a community hub with a young adult center remains strong and firmly grounded. I would like to conclude by saying what an honor and privilege it is to be sharing and celebrating what so many people refer to as G.A.P's extraordinary accomplishments. These are the sincere words that are frequently expressed to me from donors, volunteers, supporters, and grateful neighbors of G.A.P's programs. Through challenging times, G.A.P's contributions have proven to be a secure and reliable anchor to the greater Gravenhurst community. And that concludes my report. So it is now my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker this evening, someone who I consider to be a very special friend. In her role with the YWCA, Kelly Jones facilitates 3 poverty reduction programs: 1, Getting Ahead, 2, Circles Muskoka, and 3, Bridges Out of Poverty. Her personal experience growing up in poverty gives Kelly a unique ability to bridge gaps with people of low income and the community resources needed to help transform lives. Speaking of G.A.P, Kelly is also an active member of our steering committee. We are honored to have her share her valuable experiences. Please join me in welcoming Kelly to speak to us this evening.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you so much, everyone, for letting me share. For most of you that I've been in the community probably for, I guess, 5 years now, in the Gravenhurst community. I've been in Muskoka for about 8 years now. And those that are in the Gravenhurst community, I kind of hit the floor running, or hit the ground running. And I've met each and every one of you, and you've had a contribution to where I'm at now. So you might have heard pieces of my story and my journey. And so tonight I thought I would share and put it all together, and you could see the puzzle of just how amazing relationships can transform someone. So I guess I could start by condensing my 44-year life in 20 minutes. So I do come from generational poverty. So basically my dad was poor, and my grandpa was poor, and my great-great-grandpa was poor, and so on. So you're getting the drift of this. My mother was an alcoholic, and my dad ended up raising my younger sister and I. After he had gone to the United States for another snooker tournament in Las Vegas, he had received a call from his friend sharing that we were put into another foster home yet again. My dad came home finally. My dad ended up getting sole custody of us. I remember being in court. I was 5. At 5 years old, I had a visual image of me talking to the judge as she brought me into her chambers with a nice lady. She gave me a sucker, so I considered her nice. I remember the judge asking me if I wanted to live with my mom or my dad. And I chose my dad because I thought my mom didn't love us because she was an alcoholic and I didn't understand. The judge looked very sad after I had shared this. I then found out the reason why we had moved so much in my entire life. And it was always because my mom would discover where we lived and would try to take us back. And it was ruining what my dad was trying to build for us. My dad raised my sister and I in pool halls all across Canada. I was born in Calgary and my sister was born in Scarborough. We lived in some amazing little towns. We moved so much that I actually don't recall making many friends. I was also my little sister's bodyguard. She was so tiny and frail and was born deaf and had a cleft palate and didn't have an entire roof of her mouth. And it created a speech impediment and she would get made fun of on the schoolyard. And I, being the older sister and always the one who stole her macaroni and cheese, so therefore bigger, would always come up and beat up whoever was in her way. She had been through so many surgeries all the way up until she was in her 30s. I can recall my dad having to make tough decisions, trying to make sure that we had a roof over our heads and food in our bellies. I won't even share about the clothes we had to wear. Sadly, I did not look like a little girl. Yes, I had a mullet and hockey hair at some times. And in order to save money on haircuts, my dad used the bowl. I remember eating a lot of spaghetti or Spam or really smelly meats that kids in class would make fun of me for having. There was this one teacher from Czechoslovakia. She was so beautiful. She would bring in an extra orange in her lunch and place it on her desk. And she would always look at me and sort of entice me to go and take it because she understood what was happening. Her kind gestures always made my days brighter. I looked forward to seeing her at school. She was probably my one reason for going to school. When I was 7, I learned how to cook. I was tired of eating raw potatoes. Did I mention my dad was impatient? I asked my dad to get groceries and he showed me how to budget a grocery list. Looking at how many grams to cents things cost, I became quite a little chef at 7. Yes, I'm emphasizing this because I was 7 and I was cooking the family meal in order to not eat Spam or spaghetti yet again. And it was a tight budget. Again, we never knew if we would have an income source to have anything at all. My dad was an angry man that he had to give up being a professional snooker player who traveled the world. And I was the brunt of his anger. I was always walking on eggshells around him to not set him off. Even if my sister had caused any issues, I was in charge of cleaning up her mess before Dad found out. I hated asking for anything. He would call me names all the time and of course make comments about my weight, something I still struggle with. I became very resourceful and figured out how to fix things on my own. Yes, I have a pretty face and can plaster a hole in the wall or lay some flooring down without a trace. I struggled fitting in at school. I struggled with math mainly, but who didn't? Math teachers probably. I felt really lonely all the time. And of course, always feeling like you're no good because my dad told me that regularly. I can recall him saying, if you ever want to get married, lose some weight. My dad was physically and emotionally abusive for years. He was angry all the time, and there was nothing I could do that wouldn't make him not angry. Have you ever heard the statement that an abused child will always love their parents? They just stop loving themselves. It was very true for me. With that, I withdrew and wore baggy clothes, and I still have a hard time with my self-image and body confidence. My dad was in a horrible car accident when I was 13. They had to use the jaws of life to get him out of the car and had to revive him on the way to the hospital. He was in ICU for 6 months. It was also shared that he would never walk again. He was claimed professional just days before, something that he had worked for in his entire life. A lifetime of hard work was erased in one car accident. Dad went through some physical therapy and he got to move home. We made his bedroom in the den because the stairs were too much for him. It was Christmas time and we put up a tree. And I remember seeing 2 small boxes under it, which shocked me because we didn't really have very much money for Christmas at all. My dad was so excited. I'll never forget this. The best gift he gave us was when he dropped his cane and scooted across the floor. We were so proud of him. It was truly the only happy memory that I can recall from my childhood. We moved from Campbellford to Huntsville when I was 13, going into grade 9, a new school for high school, walking through the halls saying to myself, they are not a pack of wolves. They are not a pack of wolves. I was so scared. I came from a tiny farm town and Huntsville felt like a city. Even the air smelled different here. Obviously, I lived in a farm town. We lived at the Hollow Valley Lodge in a log cabin. I loved living there. There was a restaurant that we got to eat in for free. I won't even question how my dad managed to wing that. There was a beach and volleyball court that I played on until dusk. It was a nice escape from the stress. I traveled from bus to the high school. Huntsville High School was so massive to me. I came from that tiny farm town to this. It was incredible. I felt at home as the high school because everyone, even though I was the new kid, everyone just felt so welcoming and friendly. I felt like I fit in. I walked the halls with confidence in hiding my home life. I didn't really like eating in the cafeteria. I had social anxiety. It was loud and busy, and so later on, I discovered that I actually had social anxiety. I even made a friend eating lunch in the hallway. When I say lunch, it was actually a row of crackers. That's all I could bring. That was a typical lunch for me. I also started making bracelets on the bus. It was a 45-minute bus ride, and I could remember making 2 woven bracelets there and back. I charged $5 each, and then that became my lunch money. I loved Huntsville. My dad then announced we were moving again. Standing at the Main Street Bridge in Huntsville during a lunch hour, I remember contemplating on running away after vying my options. I then vowed that I would move back here someday. We then moved to Penetang, Ontario. I was already so mad at moving yet again. I became so miserable. Actually, if anyone has ever seen Roseanne, I became Darlene in her black wearing phase. And my dad actually grounded me from watching Roseanne because it was all her fault I was this way. Ignorance is bliss, I always would say. It was so tough. I actually developed a major social anxiety at this point, and it created an ulcer. So now I had to be on medication for it. And I never ate, just everything upset my tummy. I started working at Subway, and it was the most exciting job I had ever had. I would rather work and be at school than home. So I joined the volleyball team as well. Because I had to be at school for 6:30 in the morning, I started an aerobics club even at my lunch hour. I tried everything I could do just to stay away from home. After 4 years, I ended up being on the honors roll and graduated. I won an art award as well as the geography award. I must have loved moving so much that I studied each location. While we were in Penetang, my dad finally won the lawsuit from his car accident. Both my sister and I thought we were going to have a home for life. This wasn't the case. I got a pair of running shoes and a new backpack. And my sister and I actually received money for traumatic stress. And when I turned 18, I was able to receive it. I was so excited that I was going to get to go to college with this option until my dad gambled away all of his money and then asked if I could use my money to support us. I was 16 when I finally decided to leave home. I knew that there was a world out there beyond pool halls. I applied for the fine arts program at Georgian College. I wanted to go to school for art therapy and thought this would be the first step. I applied for OSAP and off to Georgian I went. I was the first Jones girl to ever go to college, the first Jones girl in general. I was very spoiled by my mère. I remember my dad being so sad that I was leaving at 16. We walked uptown and he stopped on the corner and handed me my mère's generational ring, and he started to cry. He shared how sorry he was for putting me through all the years of trauma and that I didn't get to be a kid and how lovely I turned out to be and that he was so proud of me and was going to miss me. First of all, whoa, my dad was crying. I have never seen him cry, not even at my mère's funeral. In fact, my own daughter shared that I don't cry at funerals either. I think it's generational. but now I'm noticing I cry all the time. Maybe it's hormonal. I sadly walked away from this conversation and realized that it wasn't going to affect me until June, when my dad was in ICU having a grapefruit-sized tumor removed from his stomach. And as my sister and I were there, he teared up and shared the exact same apologies he did then, how sorry he was that I didn't get to have a childhood, and how lovely I had turned out, and how lovely his granddaughters were. All I could ever hear were the years of emotional abuse, of calling me stupid and no one ever loving me. I tried so hard to forgive my dad in that moment. I turned to food addiction because of it. I ended up meeting my now ex-husband in college. We were together for 8 years. After 7, we decided to get married. I really took my time. Our beautiful daughter came from this, my 10-pound little sweetheart. She was false advertising for what kids are actually like. She giggled and smiled all day. I loved being a stay-at-home mom with her and cooking and baking and going on adventures. My husband at the time had a great paying job. I was considered middle class and life felt pretty great to not stress about things. We agreed that when our little darling was in school full time, that I would find work somewhere. And there it was. She went to school and I ended up working at Gymboree. It was amazing. I don't think I ever came home with a paycheck though. Have you ever shopped at Gymboree for kids? My ex-husband lost his 2 jobs, his job 2 weeks before Christmas, and it was so tough on him. From there, our lives spiraled as I began working 2 more jobs and he became less involved. I was coming home and showering and getting ready for my next job and hugging my baby in between, who was growing up without me. I would come home to my partner playing video games to all hours. I was working on the computer. One day I was looking on the computer for some activities for our daughter and I to do. I finally had a day off. A chat box popped up. I didn't know who it was. It said, "Are you going to come over tonight?" I replied with, "I'm not sure who this is." And then there wasn't a response, and I felt it in the pit of my stomach. I then went through the history on the computer and discovered that my husband was having an affair. Our daughter went off to school, and then I approached him and he asked him flat out, "How long have you been seeing this woman?" He tried to deny it and then became aggressive with me and wrapped his hands around my neck. I was in such shock. He released and then I ran as quickly as I could to our bedroom, where I tried to keep him from coming in. I didn't realize it that he had a knife in his hand. He then barricaded the door and begged me to not call the police because it would ruin his life. I was in complete shock that this was even happening. I was supposed to be at work in 30 minutes. I asked if I could call my boss. He wouldn't let me leave. I begged if I could just call my boss. I didn't want to lose my job as well as my husband in the same day. He wouldn't let me leave until finally he did. I asked to go grab the phone, and when I reached for it, I ran to the open space in the living room and asked him to leave. I shouted at him to leave. I said, "I won't call the cops, but you need to leave now." I called my boss and told her I was sick and wouldn't make it for my shift. And I made sure the deadbolt was on the door and collapsed and sobbed. I thought I knew this man. I thought we were vowed to each other for the rest of our lives. It took so many years of counseling and of course, many years of courtroom drama. The stress that my daughter endured of not being able to see her dad was gut-wrenching to watch. I started drinking on weekends when I was away from my daughter and dating any man that would pay attention to me. I became addicted to the attention. I knew that I had to be responsible. I just didn't want to be. It wasn't until I met the kindest man who asked me to be his girl. We dated for over a year and he found a tumor in his brain and then left me. I didn't date or drink for 3 years. I was worth more than how I was treating men and my life. My boss pulled me into the office and asked if I would like to become the assistant manager at the store. It came with benefits and more pay and hours. I was still working the bar job and the other job my other boss had asked me to do, taking on all this and juggling as a single parent. Thankfully, I had so many friends to support me through this, even my Nana and Granddad, who I finally met. Remember when I said I didn't know my mom because my dad chose to raise us? I finally met her at 18. Didn't really go over well, but boy, did I love Nana and Granddad when I finally met them. They opened their arms up and their home for my daughter and I. and took care of her in the summertime so that I could work as many hours as possible to save up and get ahead. I visited every day that I had off, and I called every single night just to say goodnight. We had a good routine. I could do this, I thought. I started walking 5 kilometers a day in order to save $25 a week in bus fare. I also lost 100 pounds over that year. I was beginning to feel tired from juggling the bar job and the store job and the other job while making coats. Did I mention that I also sew? I've always loved being a homemaker, so I learned how to make dog jackets. I have some in Montreal even. I know it's pretty impressive, but my boss believed in me. He was the first person that actually believed in my skills and my abilities. I approached my bar boss and shared with him that I think I could no longer work here at the bar. And he responded by saying, "No, we can't afford to lose you. You're the best smile at the front door. Everyone comes to see you, I swear." He increased my pay by an extra $3 just to entice me to stay. I got all dressed up and went to work. My very first shift at our very first singles night. I remember looking up, and there was this halo of light blue eyes and muscles softly speaking to me. As I snapped myself out of my daze, I realized it was our first customer and he was asking me to check his coat, not up for a date. After hours passed, he had come back to get his coat and left me a $10 tip. No one ever left me tips. As much as they loved me, my tip jar was always empty. Everyone shared that he had been asking about me all night. I kept blushing and sharing that he was for the paying customers. The following week, he came back and I caught myself in a daze. After the night was over, he asked if he could take me out for coffee sometime. How could I refuse? He was so polite and sweet. Flowers every Friday delivered to my work and having my doors open to me were so incredible. We ended up creating a life together. I was at work and got a call from my daughter's friend's mom, and she shared that my daughter was laying on her couch and that all the kids were playing outside except for her, and she didn't look well. I left for work and my fiance drove us there. Did I mention he proposed? So now we're engaged. We both looked at her and agreed she needed to go to the ER. While we were there, she had blood work done. She just laid there. Finally, the pediatrician shared that they wouldn't have the results until the morning and that we should just go home and come back first thing. We arrived there bright and early the next morning and they were hooking my daughter up to an IV. The pediatrician pulled me into her office and sat me down. She stared at my daughter's, told me that my daughter's white blood cell counts were extremely abnormal and that there was a possibility that it was leukemia and that we were heading to Sick Kids Hospital and I needed to pack for at least 2 weeks. I remember looking at her boldly sharing, "No, this isn't as bad as you're making it to be. We'll get through this." I was so determined to not believe what she was sharing. I went home and I packed. We were picked up by an ambulance. The paramedics noticed I was pregnant. So one of them offered me the nice cushioned seat next to him. When we arrived at that night in the hospital, I couldn't believe how sweet and kind everyone was. I was so scared, but I really held it all together. The nurses were so gentle with my daughter, and we were all set up in a private room. There was an alcove near her bed where a seating area was, and I laid down there to try and get some rest. An hour later, there were nurses and doctors everywhere, and my daughter's monitor was beeping and I was being woken up. I looked over and everyone was wearing masks and gowns and just completely covered. I went to the end of my daughter's bed and held onto her feet and pointed at my eyes, asking her to stay focused on them. One nurse noticed that I was extremely relaxed for being so pregnant. I shared with her that if I panic, she'll panic, and that won't be good for anyone. We almost lost her that night. We were being wheeled to the ICU and I received a phone call. It was Children's Aid. They stated that someone reported that my daughter wasn't looking well at school and that they had reasons to suspect that it was my fiance that was the cause. I shared that we were in the ICU and that there was a possibility that it was cancer. She then apologized and asked if she could see me again sometime soon. Really? I don't think that it was my fiance. There's something bigger happening here. After 2 weeks of ICU, a spinal tap, and not eating, my poor daughter had been moved up to the 8th floor. They figured out that what she had was called secondary HLH, a condition in which the body overproduces too many activated immune cells, and it was treated like cancer. They got her first round of chemo ready and injected her. She had an allergic reaction and lost her breathing. We were rushed down to ICU once again, where now my daughter was hooked up to a CPAP machine. We spent 4 more months of this intensity. All the while, my pregnant belly grew. Finally, she was discharged and I went to labor. I literally went into labor when the doctor said, we can release her. You now get to go home and have nurses come to your house to show you what your next steps are. And my new baby was coming. When it was time to go home after having an emergency C-section, yes, my second one decided to give me some trouble too. I ended up coming home. I held on to my sister was the first to hold on to my brand new baby. And that usually is the case even when we go to visit. Auntie is the coolest. I tell you now, her sister likes to take my main priority at all costs. Everything is always about my little one now because my oldest one is doing a lot better. So now even my oldest one spends time fussing about my little one. When it was time to go home, my fiance was in the worst mental health state ever. He had shared that we didn't have a home to come home to anymore and that this was not the life he had signed up for. I came home reluctantly and didn't see him for 3 nights. He had been downstairs in his man cave. He snuck upstairs one night and came into the room where I was nursing our new little daughter, and he sat at the edge of the bed feeling remorseful for the stress he had put me through while I was caring for my oldest in the hospital. Every Monday at 4:30 a.m., I packed up my daughters and drove to Toronto for my oldest to have her chemo treatments. Every other day, I flushed her PICC line, and every three times a day, I gave her 16 different meds she needed, all the while nursing my youngest. I did the laundry and robotically just got up because these are the things, these little people needed me, and these are the things you do. I was so numb. On top of it all, my ex-husband finally showed up because he caught wind of the city fundraiser that was being held for my daughter to have medication paid for. And so then he took me to court. So another thing added to my life. My fiance could not handle this stress. I seemed to be handling it just fine. He could not. He broke down one night and decided to rev a chainsaw in the house to scare us while uttering death threats. He then proceeded to throw photos off the wall. When he went back downstairs, I called 911 and shared that something was wrong with him and that he needed to leave. And we were very scared. They sent a tactical team instead of an ambulance. I was now standing on the side of the road with my daughters and listening to all the neighbors gossiping about us. It was a scene from a movie. In one swoop, I lost everything. I was not legally entitled to this house and had nowhere else to go. I'm not sharing this with you all to become a victim in this story, but I'm sharing this because it could happen to anyone. I had to go through all of this in order to get to where I'm at. And it took the relationships I built that kept me going, the encouragement. For some people, it takes longer if you don't have those supportive people in your life. Fast forward to me moving to Chrysalis here in Muskoka and applying for housing. And within 1 week of living into a shelter, I was told I was able to move into the new unit of district housing. At first, it wasn't so bad until the neighbors decided to be bullies. I was even starting to be abused by the bullies after escaping an abusive relationship. I tried really hard to keep the peace. I baked cookies and shoveled the driveway for them. I loved the fact that I had a new fenced-in backyard, but the bullies would let their dog play out there, a giant Rottweiler that would lunge at the fence anytime my daughter and I would go out there. It was really hard, and my anxiety got to an all-time high. There would be cars piled up to the end of the driveway, and they would taunt us as we would walk to the end of the driveway to bring my daughter to her bus stop. Racing cars up and down the street, revving engines, music on till all hours, dog barking, it became torture. This went on forever. And when I would call the bylaw would say, call the landlord, and the landlord would say, call the police. And it just continued. I felt like I didn't matter. While my home life was so chaotic, my one friend took this amazing course called Getting Ahead. She shared what they were learning each week, and I wanted to be in on this. I had to wait 1 year until my daughter was in school full time. I began volunteering in the Muskoka community here in Huntsville. 35 hours a week is what my Ontario caseworker clocked. He said, we're basically paying you to volunteer. but it still wasn't enough. It was flexible. I got to bring my child with me. I volunteered in the church in kids ministry. I even started cleaning the church every week. I volunteered at Christine's Place, the pregnancy center. I became a peer support worker, and I even started the cutie pie lunch on Fridays. Finally, it was my time to be a part of getting ahead. I remember how nervous I was, and I was awestruck of how many people were struggling just like me. We investigated our community, and as the group got closer, I realized we were all alike, except I was a talker. I still am. I could probably build a house, but you'd have to show me step by step. And I always had great ideas and needed to share them out loud in order to process them. If you gave me a book, I could read it, but I would dream big about hiring someone else to build my home instead. After gaining a new perspective on the resources that I was lacking, this always baffles me, but did you know that you all have 11 resources inside of you? And that if one falls apart, the others will start to follow. Only 3 of mine were thriving. My spiritual life, my emotional life, and my integrity and trust were at the highest. My emotional was stretching. As I shared, I lived in a house with bullies next door. I graduated from Getting Ahead and was offered a position to co-facilitate it for the next 3 years. This year, I've had the honor of facilitating Getting Ahead for the young adults here in Gravenhurst, learning about some of the young adults who are so resilient. They're right here in your backyard. They're your neighbors. I was invited to attend Circles in Huntsville, a weekly meeting where we have dinner and discuss barriers within our community. I became a leader of my new in life. And this is the intention of Circles. You get a support system of community members that want to be a part of your life. They sign up for this. People are signing up just to walk alongside someone, just to be someone's friend. I have 3 allies in my life. One specific ally became like a nurturing mother to me. As I mentioned, I didn't have one growing up. And this person didn't know that that was the gap that was filled for me. The other 2 are like cool sisters with cool clothes. They try to share them, but they're very stylish, and I'm just a jeans and t-shirt kind of gal. I've always been closed off because of growing up. We moved so many times, and so I thought I would have troubles maintaining these relationships. It's been 6 years of these beautiful people in my life, and I'm maintaining these relationships. Over time, our lives have changed so much. The one that nurtured me like a mother actually asked me to apply for this position that I am currently in. She believed in me more than I ever believed in myself. She shared that I have even offered her more than she expected. The other allies have become so close. Our connection has lasted even after graduating 4 years later. I'm currently a full-time employee of the YWCA Muskoka, and after 6 years of learning and growing so much, because everyone at the YWCA has fostered more growth in me, I am now the Circles Muskoka coordinator. I actually work 2 jobs, one in another community as well. I'm the poverty reduction coordinator for the Kawartha North Family Health Team. These are things that I never thought I was capable of. I sit on multiple steering committees and offering my lived experience perspective. I facilitate Bridges Out of Poverty to OPP officers and local community members. Anytime I'm feeling scared, I just remember what our ED says. They're just people in suits just like you. I have been honored to sit on G.A.P steering committee for almost 3 years now. I think 4. That pandemic sure does play with your mind. And I just love every minute that I get to contribute and have a conversation. We're changing our community little by little in such big ways. I remember writing this job on my dream board, actually. I also have my dream husband and home on that board, and for my daughters to get along, and I'm still waiting. I still have very lonely days being a single parent and raising my now 10-year-old on my own. My oldest has moved to the city and is in remission 6 years now. She is manager of a post office in Shoppers Drug Mart in the city. I still struggle with finding childcare to have a night to myself. I know it's going to come one day. I remember in the early days of joining the steering committee for G.A.P, and someone asked me, "But don't you feel like the token poor girl?" I shared, hello, tokens are usually shiny objects that help you get to where you need to go. I only hope that by sharing my vulnerabilities, that it empowers others to understand that they also have a voice and that we can help shape our community to thrive, for all to feel equal in the community, that we all can make a difference. G.A.P's mission is just that, to allow others to feel included, to offer timely solutions to barriers that are holding people back. Not only do we provide delicious and nutritious food that help us to sustain families who are struggling, but we offer a listening ear and our hearts. Transportation team works so hard to provide the best service they can to those in need of getting places. The youth program, run by some pretty stellar volunteers, are offering young folks an opportunity to be young. I didn't have a childhood, and this program allows for the youth just to enjoy being young, time to be creative and play and build confidence. I'm so honored to be a part of this grassroots organization where everyone belongs. We continue to grow as volunteers with training sessions and bonding, and the best darn more than 5-second hugs you'll ever get, and they don't feel awkward. Gravenhurst Against Poverty provides more than just food every week. It is providing a community within a community. Thank you so much for listening. And if I've been able to impact you in any way with my story, share yours. Offer your hearts in a way that shows value to others. Smile on the street. Say hello to someone you normally would never say hi to. See what a difference that intention can make in another person's life. A village has a whole new meaning now. Thank you.
Well, Kelly, some things stun you into silence, and your story certainly does that. It's remarkable. I've heard it before, and it never gets old in terms of its impact, and it's a privilege to hear it. We appreciate you sharing, and I'd like to give some time for Q&A. As you were speaking, I thought I could have stopped you at 15 different points to ask questions, and I hope that some people have some questions that they would like to ask you. And so, Brian, maybe you can keep an eye if people do use electronic hands up, but I will open it up to Q&A now if people have comments or questions for Kelly.
It looks like Carol has her hand up.
Go ahead, Carol.
Yes, I do. Kelly, first of all, every time you speak, I hear new parts of your story, and it upsets me, but I'm so thrilled to see where you are now and where you've come from. And I want to congratulate you on your journey, because it takes your own inner strength, along with help from friends and relationships, as you've said, but you've got to have some inner strength in there to get to where you've come. I have a question on the use of drugs. It sounds from your story like you did not head down that path. You said it, I think you indicated that you flirted a bit with alcohol, but you didn't head down the path of drugs. And I think we're all aware that in our community, we do have a significant number of people who are using drugs. And I just wondered what your insights are into what propelled you away from that, because I'm sure it was there as an option for you. And if there's any insight you have in things that we could do as an organization to keep our youth from heading down that path.
Yeah, so I think alcohol and men were my weakness. So the addictions were different. I could have easily gone to drugs because my dad was heavily into drugs at times, and would I can recall even visiting a farm where there was bikers there, and we actually had bikers break down our door because my dad owed them money. Like, that's what I mean. When I start sharing my story, little things will pop up, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember, I think Bonnie triggered me we were talking about something, and I remembered I lived in a van for a week as a little person. Like, there's so many parts of the story that I think I knew that there was something bigger out in the world, and that I watched my dad ruin his life with drugs, that I just didn't want to go down that route. And alcohol was easy in college because all my friends drank, and it just felt easier. Like, I didn't hang out with friends that did drugs or tried drugs, but I could have easily gone down the drug route because I said it was accessible in our home. My uncle was the grower and my dad was the dealer, so, of pot. So I mean it's the gateway drug. That's what everyone calls it. A drug is a drug. Like, it's something that alters your state. And I think that's what's happening is, when you look at small towns, there's not a lot of resources for people need to feel valued and empowered for their lives to change or be something. And you can't always see that if this is what you know. And so everybody has their own version of why they took drugs, or yeah, I can't really speak for everyone on drugs because that just wasn't, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, I just feel it's a big issue that perhaps maybe something G.A.P should be looking at. I know we've got the young adult framework in place. And are there things we can be doing to help those young people from not going down that path?
I mean, the
I
youth
don't know how
program,
we do that.
you're already doing it. The youth program is such a place for kids to just be kids. Honestly, if you think about, there's things that I can look back on my life and I didn't have that. And so I'm shocked that I didn't go down any other path, or I am where I am. But it really was relationships that I had formed, like I said, the teacher from Czechoslovakia, just that little gesture of hope for me. There's those type of people along my journey that kind of kept me on the path of, okay, I think I'm doing something, for my life that's benefiting it. But the youth get to go and just be kids, and they get to be creative, and it's not on their expense. So it's not like they get to go to mom and dad and say, we need $20 to be a part of this. And that makes a really big impact. And their mental health, thinking about this pandemic and watching my own 10-year-old, her mental health decline in such a way, and I'm struggling to try and stay on top of it. Crafts was our outlet. Glitter everywhere. Everyone loved glitter at the time, right? And it's hard, but that's what you're providing. That's what G.A.P is doing, is providing a safe space for us to just be ourselves. And the more we can do that, we release the demons, we release what's inside of us, and we have a safe place to land. And I think that's why I loved circles so much and why I held on, because like I said, everyone there signed up to be there, which meant they were safe people. And they're filtered through the coach, right? The coach is saying, yeah, you're valid, you can come in. I don't think you're gonna, you don't have any ill intentions. We just need more safe spaces for individuals just to be who they are. And that's what G.A.P does.
Thanks, Kelly. Do we have any other comments or questions? Joan, do I see something waving there? Oh no, she must be petting her dog. One of the things I was going to ask Kelly was, I know you talked about the volunteer program that you had to do with the district. And I know there's a whole other parts of your story with your experience with social assistance. But can you just illustrate that a little bit more? Like, why did you have to do 35 volunteer hours, or was that optional? Or
Oh, no, it was, so when I first moved to Huntsville, obviously I had a daughter with cancer and a brand new baby. There was I can't get a job. Like, that's, really, I felt like when you were on Ontario Works, you did have to attend the mandatory things that they would put out. And I remember they had like 12 or 13 different, like WMIS and Smart Serve and all those types to help you be ready for jobs. And I was like, yeah, sign me up. I'm a learner. I love learning. And then I would get this paper in the mail that this is the date when it's on, but there's no childcare options. And I was like, well, and then if you signed up for them and didn't show up, you got reprimanded. And I always thought, well, am I going to lose my check then? And I would go into a complete panic state. And it was my employment caseworker. He just said, you know, why not try volunteering, because you can at least, you know, you might find something that's really flexible, or, you know, whatever that looks like. It ended up being that I just loved volunteering so much because it was away from home, social connection, and I got to bring my daughter to Christine's place because it was a pregnancy center, or the church because she was right there playing, and, you know, while I was vacuuming. So I ended up volunteering the equivalent of 35 hours a week, which, yeah. And then walking everywhere. That was probably like the other, because I was walking up to 3 to 4 hours a day because I didn't drive, and the transit system in Muskoka is fun. So,
as we well know. I think,
yes.
Jerry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Kelly, I have to say, I've heard about half of your story before, and now hearing the other half, my admiration for you has gone through the roof. So congratulations for getting to where you are now, and for what you're contributing to the community.
I appreciate that, Jerry. I always share my favorite ally story is when I did a Probus meeting and this man came downstairs and said, how old do you have to be an ally? And I looked at you and said, how old are you? And you said, well, I don't want to tell you that. And I said, well, then do you want to be a friend to someone? And you said, I could do that. I said, then you're an ally. I just remember that's how that rolled. And yeah, and honestly, it's literally all of you that contribute to each and every one of us who are struggling, that safe space to land. You guys have all become my allies. I had to graduate from my program because I now got this new job, and I was petrified that now I had to facilitate a group that I was very uncertain about. And it was all of you as allies to the group that became my allies through that. And, you know, Bonnie, to be honest, you were probably the one that has, like, right from when I shared my story the first time all the way to now, like, you've been navigating that momentum and drive, and then sitting down to hear all of your stories connects us. And so, yeah, I just really value and honor all of you and what you're contributing to the community. I'm really grateful for you all. And Brian's tech services, I'll never forget them.
Yeah, for those who might not know what Kelly's referring to, for her Bridges Out of Poverty workshop that she gave to the G.A.P steering committee a few weeks back, Brian was there to save the day in terms of the technology. It was old and new technology, trying to match it up. So Brian was there to help us. And
Brian
yeah,
has time. He should do some how-to videos.
There are a few of us here who are allies with the Circles program.
Yeah.
And it's probably worth noting that all of the allies, I think, of the Circles program came over to the G.A.P program. And
You're
so
welcome.
Yes, thank you. And so it's kind of interesting when you're interested in poverty reduction, you know, it's like, where can I be of service? And so that's great. And Kelly, you've done an amazing job with mentoring those leaders, as we call people who are trying to get out of poverty and who the allies are becoming intentional friends with. And you've done a remarkable job of mentoring them and working alongside of them.
Now on to the new fresh phase.
Your new role, yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Any other comments or questions? Yep, as I said, it's there's so much to think about and to absorb, and if it's the first time hearing Kelly's story, it's kind of like getting fire hosed, right, Peggy Ann? That's an expression somebody used when they first came to one of our, I think it was one of our advisory council meetings. They got so much information.
It was, yes. It's a great expression.
Yeah, he said, I feel like I've been fire hosed. You just don't know what to do with it all.
We said, any questions?
Yeah. So I know it has that impact on people that.
And if you ever, I will say, if you ever need a hug, Kelly's the girl.
Yeah.
It's funny because Peggy Ann, when you hugged me, I was like, oh, we're doing this. Now this is a public thing. We're hugging now. Oh, okay. It was just sort of out of the blue, but very needed.
Well, again, I'm going to say thank you. It's been a privilege to hear your story, Kelly. And it just emphasizes the power of human connection. And it's a call to action to all of us to be aware of those around us and how they might be struggling. And we do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And with that, I know that Beth was going to be the host and she was going to have closing remarks, but I don't have any closing remarks because I think everything that needs to have been said has been said. But I want to thank everyone for being here. We appreciate your support and your encouragement. So with that, I will say, have a very good evening, be safe and be healthy.